All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Breeders' Cup webinar handicapping session with Randy Moss and Mike Watchmaker. I'm Mike Hogan, Director of Product Marketing here at the Daily Racing Forum, and it's my pleasure to be joined for the first part of this session by Mr. Randy Moss. You know him very likely as the NBC Sports racing analyst for the Breeders' Cup, for the Triple Crown races, for all the other races that NBC Sports broadcasts. But he's also, of course, the creator of the Moss Pace figures, and he's been on a number of these sessions before. It's my privilege to welcome Mr. Randy Moss. Welcome, Randy.
Hey, thanks. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I know your schedule is pretty crazy, and not least of which because of everything you're doing with NBC Sports. So we'll just have you for the first portion of this. Mike Watchmaker will be joining halfway through as you drop and run off to some of your other engagements. So really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Those of you that do have questions for Randy, you can submit them through the webinar chat panel. I'm showing it on the screen right now. I'll pass them over. Hopefully we'll answer some of them organically as we discuss things. But with that in mind, Randy, let's just jump straight over into Formulator. Let's take a look at some of the races. I know we only have you for a short time, so we won't cover every one of them. Let's just talk about some of your strongest opinions, starting with the races on Friday. Where do you want us to begin?
Well, it kind of depends on the races you think would be the most interesting. Obviously, pace figures are only available for dirt races and not grass, just because of the nature of grass racing and dirt racing. But that doesn't mean we can limit our discussion
of course
to dirt races, because I've got some strong opinions on at least a couple of the turf races. Well, why don't we just start with the two-year-old turf races, both of them.
All right, let's start with the 6th on Friday. It's the, of course, they're all grade ones. It's the grade 1 Juvenile turf. A full field in here with some nice European invaders as well as some decent American horses. Where did you land in this one?
Well, normally when you look at the history of the juvenile turf, whether it's in California or whether it's on the East Coast, the race has been dominated, almost totally dominated by Europeans. This year, I don't consider the Europeans to be as talented as some of the Europeans that we've seen in the past. Lancaster Bomber, who drew the rail for Aidan O'Brien, was second to their best two-year-old Churchill in a race at Newmarket, but he was 66-1 that day.
He's the rabbit for Churchill.
Got a little. Yeah, he was. He was in front early, then he dropped back to 4th or 5th mid-race, and then rallied again along the rail to finish second. It was an okay race, but nothing that would really stand out. Their other horse, Intelligence Cross, was 4th last time out in a Group 1 at 10-1, and a little bit of a dull effort. And Rodani had a really poor race in his last start at Newmarket. So I think this is going to be a different race than what we're accustomed to seeing. And I think the American Good Samaritan is the most likely winner in there, and I'm pretty confident in him. The way he ran his last start in the summer at Woodbine, coming off his turf debut at Saratoga. He went from last to first in the summer. A very impressive move. You've got Bill Mott in your corner, fast figure. So to me, the race, handicapping it, comes down to Good Samaritan versus the California horse Big Score. I really liked his last couple of races and stakes races on dirt in Southern California. 2 back at the Del Mar Juvenile Turf. He was compromised by a slow start in a very speed-favoring course and still finished very strongly to be second. Last time out, he was 3 wide on both turns in the Zuma Beach. He got a pace set up. It was a very, very fast pace in that race. But visually, very impressive. The number was good. So to me, it comes down to those two, Good Samaritan and Big Score.
All right, there's a live long shot in here I like. He's actually the one that ran 3rd last out to Good Samaritan, Channel Maker. I don't know if you watched that race, but
I did. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, particularly focusing on Channel Maker, my trip note for him is it just says Mr. Toad, because that was a really wild ride he had in that race. He found all kinds of trouble, and I think at a big price, I wouldn't be surprised if he could hit the board.
He was up on the lead the first eighth of a mile, almost the first quarter of a mile, basically. Then it looked like he was almost wrestled back by Contreras to, fourth or fifth spot. He found trouble. It didn't have a clear path until turning into the stretch at about the 3/16 pole or so. He got clear, ducked to the inside. At 30-1 in the program, I think he would be an excellent value play. The only concerns I had about him was that he didn't really light it up once he got clear in the stretch, and he kind of runs with his head up high.
Mm-hmm.
He's I don't know if maybe Contreras felt he was uncomfortable being down on the inside, and that's why he wrestled him back and tried to steer him out a little bit. But at 30-1, I think you could do a lot worse than that, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. The next race is a race that your pace figures, I think, will play a fairly big role in. So let's go ahead using Formulator. And apologies to those of you, I just neglected to share my screen. Should be now sharing it. So those of you watching, you can see I just went to Formulator, did the view drop down, added the Moss pace figure line. So that will appear for all of the dirt races that any of the horses have run in North America. And let's go through this field. You've got a horse in here that could be loose on the lead. Do you see Run Happy as potentially wiring this one, or is it all Dortmund?
I see Run Happy as more than likely being loose on the lead. I think he is a freakishly talented horse from last year in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. I have serious concerns about the way he's being trained.
Sure.
So therefore, I think Run Happy is an overlay at his 3-1 odds in the program, and I think Dortmund is probably the most likely winner in the 2 days of the Breeders' Cup. But unfortunately, Dortmund will probably be about even money. If you look at Run Happy, when he ran in the ACAC off a layoff, he ran in that race off only 5 workouts, which a layoff from December to October for a horse like Run Happy, stretching out to a mile, in my opinion, is a pretty bizarre way for a horse to be trained up to a race. Mm-hmm. And then coming out of that, if you go back and you look, it's on YouTube. You look at his workout October the 19th at Keeneland. It was a 1 mile workout that basically started at the half-mile pole and ended at the half-mile pole. He was under a drive the first part of the workout, literally. Stopped to a walk the last quarter of a mile. He went 27 and change for the last quarter of a mile in a workout. And it was bizarre. And I don't know what they're doing with this horse. He came back and worked well after that, but I just don't have any confidence.
Sure.
In A, the choice of the mile as opposed to the sprint, and B, the way he's being trained up to this race.
Sure.
So I think Dortmund stalks and gets a perfect trip. And to me, it comes down to Dortmund and Gunrunner. I think those are the two that stand out over the rest of the field. I could use Vijack as well, but I think the play is to try to beat Run Happy, definitely.
All right. Well, let's keep it going. Let's move on. We've got a lot of races to cover, and I know you've only got about 20 more minutes with us. Let's quickly go through the Juvenile fillies turf, which is the 8th race on Friday.
Do not have a strong opinion. I think the best horse in the race on paper is La Coronel, but she drew a disastrous post position, and she's at the far outside post 14. Her running style is not conducive to a post like that. She doesn't have the early speed to get in front of the crowd of horses. She doesn't come from way back in the pack, so they don't want to take her back to last to get a better trip. I think she could get hung out pretty wide, and the same for the 13 roly-poly. Mm-hmm. Those might be the two best horses on paper, and they're just really hurt by the draw. So to be honest with you, I don't really have a strong opinion. I think Hydrangea from post 1 might be the horse to beat. She'll save ground going into that first turn. She'll be covered up, which is what the Europeans like. But she's not even the best of the Coolmore 2-year-old filly. She may not even be the second best. So I really don't have a whole lot of confidence in her. The 3-horse New Money Honey, I think, at 10-1 could be a good play. A lot of people are going to chalk up her last win to a yielding course. But she went 22-3 the last quarter mile. Now, they walked the first part of the race, which means they're all going to come home fairly fast. But The course wasn't as slow as the fractions indicate. When you look at it from a pace perspective, you see yield and course. You see 25-4, 51-2, 115-4, and you think, wow, the course was really soft. Not if they close in 22-3 the last quarter mile.
Mm-hmm.
So I think New Money Honey's race was maybe a little bit underrated, and I think she's got a big shot at a good price.
All right, let's go on to the main event on Friday. Perhaps for some viewers, myself included, actually, this might be the main event of all the Breeders' Cup races. You've got the 2-year-old champion from last year, the 3-year-old champion from last year, and the older mare champion from last year, all facing off against each other. How do you separate all three of those fantastic fillies in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, Randy?
Put me into that category as well. I'm looking forward to the Breeders' Cup Distaff even more than the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think this is just an amazing race. You've got a future Hall of Famer, surefire Hall of Famer in Songbird, who might be the best 3-year-old filly of all time at this point. You've got a surefire future Hall of Famer in Beholder, who's won 17 races, and you've got a horse in Stellar Wind that's running like a Hall of Famer in her last couple of races. To be perfectly honest with you, Songbird, you hear people say, well, we don't know how good she is yet. She hasn't been tested. Mike Smith says you never really had to ask her in the stretch. To me, that's a hugely overrated handicapping philosophy, because horses like Songbird almost always give their best. And it doesn't, they're not really usually going to run significantly faster if the jockey is busy on their back than they are if he's not, as long as they're not being completely eased the last 16th of a mile, which has happened in some of Songbird's races. I think she sets the pace. Beholder stalks her in close proximity. I think at some point Beholder is going to go up and hook Songbird, and they'll be eye to eye, maybe even going into the second turn. And therefore, I think, to be honest with you, I think it sets up for Stellar Wind. I think she'll be the highest price of the three. They've taken Stellar Wind out of her game in the last 2 starts to keep Beholder from getting an easy lead, and she still won anyway. I think Beholder might be better with a target, but I think Stellar Wind, in my opinion, is the horse to beat in here. But what a race. You wouldn't be surprised to see Songbird win. If Beholder gets a nice stalking trip in second, you wouldn't be surprised to see her win at all. It's an amazing race. And the others are good too, but those are the big three. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you've got a year where, compared to last year where Wedding Toast was the favorite, you've got a year where there's some serious, legitimate, like you said, Hall of Fame caliber horses in here. And the best 3-year-olds from last year in this race are showing up again in Stellar Wind and Carolina, and they're arguably much better than they were at this time last year. So it's a fantastic, fantastic race. And I'm kind of with you. I think Stellar Wind is the best filly in the race, and she might be the best price of those three. It's a fantastic betting opportunity, to say the least. All right, let's... We've got about 15 more minutes before I know you have to duck out. Let's jump over to the Saturday card. We don't have to go through all of them. We got 9 races to cover and 15 minutes to do so. Let's just pick a couple spots. Where are you excited about for Saturday?
I can save you some time. I don't have a strong opinion in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies. I think it's a bad race. Unfortunately, we don't have a Songbird in there this year, and it's a pretty weak field. I don't even know if the best fig horse, American Gal, is going to run. She drew the far outside post, and there's some question as to whether they're actually going to run her or not. So I don't have a strong opinion. I don't even like the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies race at all. The filly and mare turf, Lady Eli is, I guess, the probable favorite. Sure. I know Chad Brown and Irad Ortiz think that Lady Eli is as good or better than she's ever been. Her numbers say she's as good or better than she's ever been. Visually, you watch her as a 2-year-old, and maybe this is just a function of the competition she was facing then and now, but as a 2-year-old, you watched her races, and almost every time there was a wow moment.
Right.
It was like, whoa, boy, is she good. You don't get that same sort of wow from Lady Eli in her 2 comeback races since Laminitis. Now, she did finish in 22 and change in the Flower Bowl the last quarter of a mile. She ran a heck of a race. But I would take Seventh Heaven of Coolmore and Aidan O'Brien over Lady Eli in this race. Go back if you can and watch a replay of her last start on YouTube. The British Champions Filly and Mare Stakes. You won't see the post position in the racing form. She's in post 13, which is farthest away from you when you're watching the video. It will be among the most bizarre rides you've ever seen in your life. Ryan Moore, one of the best jockeys, maybe the best jockey in the world, was on her. Let's just say it was not his finest moment. He wanted to drop back and get to the inside, but he dropped back so quickly it almost looked like Seventh Heaven had broken down. And it was just literally bizarre. And then he got stopped on the inside after that. So that race, you draw a line completely through it. Her race before that, she beat Found, although Found might not have been at her absolute best. But I think Seventh Heaven, in my opinion, is a better play than Lady Eli and will be a better price. Sprint, I love Masochistic.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I'm kind of with you on that. I think he's the fastest horse early, and he's in career best form here.
And he's doing so good right now that I think Mike Smith, and I talked to him about this, I think Mike is going to ride him without any huge sense of urgency. Now, by that, I mean he's been on Dreyfong, who breaks from post number 2. He chose to ride Masochistic over Dreyfong. He thinks Dreyfong is probably a little quicker jumping away from the gate than Masochistic. Delta Blues man, Jorge Navarro, the trainer, has already said we're sending him to the lead. Masochistic, Smith expects to be behind those two for like maybe the first 16th of a mile, but close. And then he thinks Masochistic will either be next to them or will be in front by the time they go into the turn. He loves Santa Anita. He's got the home course advantage. Dreyfong's based out here too, but I just think Masochistic is definitely the horse to beat in there. Turf Sprint, you could go so many different directions in the Turf Sprint. I don't really have a strong opinion, except the two horses that I'm going to focus on are obviously from post 2. His last race was amazing, just amazing. To be up there going a mile and 21 and 2, 43 and 4, and to still look like a winner at the 16th pole, and a good horse in Vijay beat him a length, and now he's going 6.5 down the hill. He's won once already, way back earlier in his career at this distance. If you look at the Formulator lifetimes, I'm not hugely confident, but he's been running against better horses. He's, running his 5th Breeders' Cup and all that. And the other horse is A Lot, trained by Chad Brown. In the 4-star Dave last out at Saratoga, 22 flat final quarter mile. Absolutely flying. Now, he's never been down the hill. That's a bit of a concern, but he's really doing good. He looks good. He's training superbly. He'll be really running late. So, and Celestine I could see as well.
Yeah.
Philly.
So you like the cutback. You like the 3 cutback horses. Let me ask you about the Europeans in this one. There's a number of Europeans, and we actually have a question from Chris Watts, wants to know your take specifically on Washington, D.C., who he said was a good second in August. What do you think about him? Is he a player, or any of the Europeans players in here?
It's unusual. I've got to go back and look at my previous past performances for this race. I don't remember there being the Europeans participating this aggressively in the Breeders' Cup Sprint in the past, especially the sprints down the hill. Right. Washington, D.C. is kind of a hard horse to gauge. Yeah, I find a lot of the European sprinters as kind of a hard horses to gauge. He hasn't won a race since May, and that was in a very a minor stakes in a small racetrack in Ireland. Before that, again, it was another win of very little circumstance. He's never won a group stakes. He's been close in some Group 1s and Group 2s. I really don't know what to think of him. I don't have what I would consider to be an informed opinion about Washington, D.C., other than nothing that I've seen in video particularly blew me away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if he won, but Carrar, another one of the Europeans, was second to Lamato, who's one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup Mile. He was on the lead in that race in the Prix de la Forêt. And Lamato was just right behind him and then spurted to the lead and drew off. Carrar ran well to hang on for second over Suédois, another horse that's going to be running in the mile. Home of the Brave was okay. I don't think, I'm not really that high on Home of the Brave. So I prefer, when you have a horse like Obviously, who's one of the best milers in the country, I don't know why he was put on the also eligible list and buried in the mile the way he was. I think that was a mistake. But I think he deserves to be in the mile, and I think it'll be interesting to see how he runs in the sprint.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's interesting. And I think that's probably one of the most wide-open races, if not the most wide-open races of all of the Breeders' Cup races. Okay, we don't have much more time. We do want to make sure we get to your opinions on both the Classic as well as we got a question from Andrew Siakia. Sorry, Andrew, if I'm butchering your name, about the pace scenario of the filly and mare sprint. But before we do that, do you have anything quick to say about the Juvenile?
I think the Juvenile is one of the best juveniles we've seen in recent years. I think there are some seriously talented future Kentucky Derby possibilities. Classic Empire, not this time. I think Three Rules might be underrated. Practical Joke has done nothing wrong for Chad Brown. I'm leaving out Klimt and Syndergaard and Gormley. I think these are very, very good horses. Mm-hmm. No big, strong opinion, except California horses tend to dominate the Juvenile when it's run in California. Even really good East Coast horses that have gone on to win Triple Crown races have not done well or have not won the Juvenile when it's been out at Santa Anita or on the West Coast, period. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think Klimt, especially if he goes off like at 6 or 8 to 1, even though he had no excuse last time, draws a good post and might be a decent play, but I don't really have any confidence. Filly Mare Sprint, pace scenario. Well, there's not as much speed in the filly mare sprint, which I'm sure is the basis for the question, as there typically would be and as you would think the filly and mare sprint would have. I would expect Karina Mia to be the most likely pace setter in there, along with Glory Zapper. Glory Zapper probably to the front and Karina Mia just to her outside. I think the speed horses will have an advantage because the pace shouldn't be that fast. So, therefore, I think that there might be a chance here that Karina Mia can turn the tables on Have You Gone Away, who beat her in the Ballerina at Saratoga when they went 109 flat for the first 6 furlongs.
Yeah. No,
Breeders' Cup, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm with you on that. I think Glory Zapper at a price is an interesting play in there.
Breeders' Cup Turf, no strong opinions. The logical horses are Flincher and Found. I tend to think that Flincher probably wins. Mm-hmm. But, Found is obviously, one of the most talented turf horses in the world. If you look at her last couple of races, you look at the past performances and you think, wow, she ran October the 2nd. And then she ran October the 15th, and now they're going to bring her here, cross the pond, run again. She can't possibly, be ready for a third race like that. Exactly the same thing they did last year.
Right. Exactly.
And she won the Breeders' Cup Turf anyway at 6 to 1. But she won the turf last year, I think, primarily because Golden Horn didn't handle the conditions. They said before the race that they were very worried about a course that was so off that they went 1.5 miles in 2:32. It was listed as good. It was really more like soft. So I think that's the reason why Found probably won, and therefore I think Flincher on a California firm track probably has the advantage over Found in there. But I can't see any other horse win besides those two, to be honest with you.
Let me ask you a question from a pace standpoint. Do you think there's a chance Ashley Love Sugar is loose on the lead, and maybe if not good enough to win, here's a horse that seems to be in career form, likes the Santa Anita surface, likes the firm turf, does well at the distance, and could have a pace advantage. Is this one that you might use to to spice up your exotics with some of the other logicals?
Personal opinion, I think Ashley Love Sugar probably sets the pace. I know Ecto is inside of Ashley Love Sugar, and they're going to want Ecto to be up in the mix. There's a chance Ecto could set the pace if Gary Stevens doesn't want to go to the lead with Ashley Love Sugar. But personally, even if Ashley Love Sugar makes the early lead, I think, unless you want to put him in third, and at the bottom of your trifectas, to me, I think that's the ceiling for Ashley Love Sugar. And then you've got Ulysses, a horse from Sir Michael Stout's who is improving. You know, one of the Europeans that's really been underrated coming into this race. So I do think Ashley Love Sugar in that scenario would have a chance to be part of the trifecta, but only in the bottom part.
Okay. All right. Let's. We've only got a few minutes left. We've got a couple races left. Quickly on the Breeders' Cup Mile. Do we have a repeat of last year with Tepin, or is she a little bit vulnerable this year? What's your take?
Well, you got to take a stand somewhere, right? I mean, you got to have an opinion. And to me, Tepin's last two starts were visually and on paper the two worst performances that she's had basically in the last year. So coming off that trip to Royal Ascot, I'm a little concerned that maybe she's not quite as sharp, quite as fresh as she was going into last year's Breeders' Cup Mile, quite as dominant. So I think Tepin is a play against, especially as the favorite. To me, I really like Ironicus. I loved the way Ironicus ran in the Shadwell Mile. He got too far back early with the last quarter, and I think, 22-2 or something like that.
22.
It was just absolutely, absolutely flying. And, you know, that was his first race off a layoff. He'd had some foot problems. I think it sets him up perfectly for this race. Shug McGahee, you know, is going to have him in absolutely perfect form. The Europeans, to me, aren't as strong as you would expect. I think the filly, Alice Springs, will draw a lot of money, but she's been running against the females over there and it's been winning. But, you know, Lamato, I think, is very talented. There's a question about him at a mile. Is he as good at a mile as he is sprinting? But I think it comes down to Ironicus, Lamato, and Tepin. If I had to pick the top three, that's what it would be.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, this is one of the races that Aidan O'Brien's never won. He's 0 for 14 in the mile. So, and a lot of those horses will end up taking money, but have proven to be a bit vulnerable. So I'm kind of with you. I think there's going to be a lot of pace in here with Photo Call, with What a View. It's going to help set things up for one to rally from off the pace. I think Ironicus is the one that makes a lot of sense. All right, we have just a couple minutes left. The big event on Saturday is the Breeders' Cup Classic. A lot of people are billing it as a two-horse race. Do you see it as just nearly a match race between Arrogate and California Chrome, or are you getting a little creative in here?
I don't think there's any horse in the field that can beat California Chrome except Arrogate. And that's with all due respect to Frosted. I think the only way Arrogate beats California Chrome is if he can duplicate his race in the Travers. By far the best race of his career. I have my biggest concerns about Arrogate are this. Number one, there's the old bounce factor, if you're a big believer in that. Bob Baffert, though, is one of the best in the business at getting horses to duplicate big efforts back-to-back, especially young horses. Second concern with him is that I have some concerns about his early speed. I mean, he was fast in the Travers. He was pretty much sent in the Travers from the inside post position. Mike Smith seems to believe that Arrogate has so much early speed that he could very easily be positioned just outside of California Chrome without much effort, that he's faster early than Frosted, that he's faster early than Melatonin. I'm not convinced. If you look at his earlier races, Arrogate really ran some slow-paced races and didn't really break all that sharply from the gate.
Right.
So, you know, my concern about Arrogate is that he gets caught 3-4 wide on the second turn. He's back third or fourth, and he's just in a completely different type of race, losing ground, than he was in the Travers. But if everything goes Arrogate's way, if he can stalk California Chrome, if he can run just as effectively and just as impressively as he did in the Travers, then he might have a shot at beating California Chrome. But I would be surprised if California Chrome loses.
All right. And with that, I think it's time. I think your time with us is done. And I think we have Mike Watchmaker on. Mike, are you there?
I am here, Mike. Hi, Randy.
All right. Well,
Hey, Mike.
Thank you so much. This is like an old wrestling tag team handoff. Mike takes the baton from Randy. Thank you so much, Randy. Thanks for taking the time in your busy schedule. We really appreciate it, and good luck with all of your coverage at NBC Sports for the Breeders' Cup.
Thanks, man. You guys have fun. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you. And welcome, Mike. We have, of course, Mike Watchmaker on, the Daily Racing Form's national handicapper. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
My pleasure, Mike.
All right, well, we're going to do a speed round with you like we did with Randy. We've got 13 races, and we've got a half hour to cover them all. We don't need to talk about every one unless you really want to, but let's maybe pick some spots where you're most excited to put some of your money, or at least just to watch the racing.
If you want to talk about them all, I'm prepared. I mean, I've done the work.
Let's do it. Well, let's quickly start. I clicked on the 7th race on Friday, but let's start on the 6th race on Friday, the first of the Breeders' Cup races. It's, of course, the Juvenile turf. Do you see this as one of the Europeans coming in, or is this a more wide open race than that?
This has been a race that the Europeans have historically dominated, but I'm not, really enthralled with their representation in this race this year, and I picked Big Score. I realize that Big Score is a big win in the Zuma Beach, which is, by the way, and I think quite notably, the at the distance over the course prep. I'm well aware that race was pace-aided. But still, he was most impressive because he was caught 3 wide around both turns, and he still put in, I thought, a very impressive turn of foot in upper stretch. And he looks to me like a horse who hasn't gotten near to his bottom yet. And I'm going with the California horse, Big Score.
All right. I like it. A lot of people, it seems like, are on, of the Americans, are on Good Samaritan, but I like you taking the contrarian approach here, because I think Big Score has a nice shot, too.
Well, the only issue I have with Good Samaritan, he's obviously a runner, is I'm just skeptical of that 94 buyer figure in the summer. Mm-hmm. The horses that ran behind him in that race all also improved markedly. Now, 2-year-olds can do that. They're lightly raced, immature horses, and they can improve dramatically from race to race. But, when 5 or 6 of them all improve in the same race, it automatically makes me a little skeptical of the number. And while Good Samaritan might still be able to win this race, even if that 94 is too high, I think these horses are going to take a lot of money because you got that big ticket this last race, and I'm skeptical of it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. All right, let's move on to the Dirt Mile. Is this Dortmund's race to lose, or do you think that there's some other possible upsetters in here?
No, I don't have a clever idea here. I think Dortmund towers over this field. His seconds to California Chrome and the Awesome Again in San Diego Handicap just bury this field. Mm-hmm. He's the controlling speed in the race, and he's cutting back to a distance that might be his best. I think this race is all about Dortmund, and the idea, if you're going to bet this race in vertical fashion, is to try and get a little bit clever underneath. And I don't know if I'm being clever underneath when I'm picking Tamarcuse second and Vijak third, but that's who I prefer in the immediate underneath slots. Tamarcuse is a horse that Kieran McLaughlin repeatedly ran in Grade 1 races when he first came to the U.S., and he wasn't showing on the racetrack why Kieran kept on doing that. I have immense respect for Kieran, and in his last 2 races, he's finally shown why he was pitted so highly in his initial U.S. starts. I actually messed around with him a little bit and managed to cash when he ran second at 26-1, 20-1 rather, than the 4-2 starts back. And his effort in the Kelso last time out was a good one too. As for Vijak, I know that he capitalized on a complete pace meltdown when he won the City of Hope Mile, which was on the turf in his last start, but I really think that he's a horse who's better on dirt, and I like the surface switch for him.
All right, let's keep it going with the 8th race on Friday. That's the Juvenile fillies turf. Another one with some Europeans invading and then some strong North American runners. Where'd you land in here?
Well, I hate the post. but I still pick La Cornell in here. I just think that she's something special. You know, she's run a turf twice. She won in common gallops both times. The first time she ran on turf, she got her maiden win. That was in her third career start. She absolutely crushed the filly who came back to win the Miss Grillo. And then last time out in the Jessamine, she just blew that field off the racetrack and did it in good time too. And you know, I don't like the 14 hole in here, and she's not the kind of filly that is an absolute drop back closer. So I do think that she's going to get caught wide on the first turn. But you know, I just have immense respect for this filly. I think she's going to be really, really good, and I'm hoping two things: one, that she can overcome the 14 hole, and two, people are going to avoid her because of her bad draw, and that might actually inflate her price a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to mention Hit It a Bomb last year. Well, of course, it wasn't the Juvenile, not the Juvenile fillies turf, but from the 14 post, it's, I think 7-1. If he'd drawn differently, he would have been much shorter than that. Maybe the same thing happens here with La Coronel. All right, let's go on to the main event for Friday with Randy. Randy and I both kind of agreed, of all of the races in the Breeders' Cup, this is the one we're both most excited in seeing because you've got Songbird, you've got Stellar Wind, you've got Beholder, as well as some other good older fillies in here. Mike, is this a race that you're excited to bet, or are you going to be watching this one as a fan?
Both, actually. You know, the race has obvious appeal as a fan. You know, outside of the three champions, Beholder, Stellar Wind, and Songbird, I mean, you've got some very, very good mares in here, too. I mean, Carolina's a really, really good filly. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there are others in here, too, that are I mean, Forever Bridal's a good filly, too, and you know, she's going to be close, you know, double-digit odds. Mm-hmm. You know, the thing about this race is I'm a big Songbird fan, but, you know, if she wins this race, I'll tip my hat to her because she'll do it without me. It's you know, she's faced pace pressure in her recent races, but I don't think she's faced the kind of quality pace pressure that she's going to get from Beholder. But even more than that, she's never run against opponents like Beholder and Stellar Wind, who are very well familiar with triple-digit buyer figure territory, and you know, Songbird has yet to earn a triple-digit buyer figure, and you know, you might have been able to make the argument early in her career that Songbird probably could have run faster than the figures she earned because she won all those races really wrapped up. But you know, she was asked in her recent races. You know, she was ridden strongly to the wire in both of her races in Saratoga, and I thought that was also you know, somewhat the case in the Cotillion. I mean, you know, she wasn't as all out in the Cotillion as she was in her two races at Saratoga. But even though she won those Saratoga races by open length, she was really asked. And you know, I don't think that you know, she's quite as fast as these mares. And the other thing is, I wound up picking Stellar Wind in this race. I was most impressed with the way Stellar Wind beat Beholder in Stellar Wind's last two starts, because she was really up against it tactically in those races. Beholder controlled very easy paces that day, and Stellar Wind had to be used basically from the get-go just to keep her honest early, and yet still managed to wear her down and beat her. And I think Stellar Wind projects to sit a much better trip this time, because, you know, whether it happens early or in the middle stages of the race, Beholder's going to go after Songbird, and they're going to hook. And that's going to allow Stellar Wind to sit back. She's not going to have to do the dirty work this time. Sit back and make the late run that she's most effective doing. So, you know, I think from a trip standpoint, Stellar Wind's getting a better one than she did even the last two times she's beaten Beholder.
Yeah, and I'm with you as well. Songbird might just very well be a super filly, and she might just go to the lead and not stop, but she's certainly never faced horses that have had closing kicks like she'll face on Friday in the distaff. Either way, no matter what happens, it's a race I'm really excited to watch. All right, let's move on to Saturday, and we'll quickly go over all the Saturday Breeders' Cup races. That's starting with race 4. That's the Juvenile fillies. A pretty wide open edition of this race, although there is one filly in here who towers over the rest, at least on the Beyer speed figures. What are you doing in the Juvenile fillies?
Well, I'm not enthralled with this group. I think to at least this point in the season, this is a pretty modest crop of 2-year-old fillies, and so I'm not. I don't have any reservations about taking the horses not proven in a stakes race and is actually making her stakes debut in this spot. And I picked Valladorna in here. Now, Valladorna is also doesn't quite match up from a Beyer figure standpoint either, but I thought from a visual perspective, her maiden win last time out of Keeneland, going 2 turns at this mile and the 16th distance, was quite impressive. She made a big sweeping long sustained run and drew off to win in isolation. It was only her second career start. She's a filly that I think is going to improve markedly with racing. And, you know, like I said, you know, the others are just okay. You know, Northern Quarter, I think, is absolutely the filly to beat. She won the track and distance prep when she won the Chandelier. It was not a visually impressive victory. I mean, she was had to work hard to be with honors. It was making her dirt debut that day, but you know, things I've been hearing since I've been here at Santa Anita is that Northern Quarter is trading out of her mind. So I respect her, and I think she's the most dangerous. But I just don't think that this is a particularly special group right now, and I think Valladorna has got a lot of room to improve from one race to the next. I think maybe more so than some of the others in this race, and I'm just going with her because I just think she's an interesting new kind of face.
All right, let's keep it going with the 5th race on Saturday. It's the first of a number of Breeders' Cup races on Saturday that will be on the turf, the filly and mare turf. Lady Eli will be both the betting and sentimental favorite to win in here. Do you think she's the most likely winner, or do you think she's vulnerable?
I think she can absolutely win. You know, this won't be the case in some later races that we'll talk about, but I kind of chalked out in this race. I picked Seventh Heaven over Lady Eli only because if Seventh Heaven runs back to her race 2 back when she absolutely thrashed Found, winner of the Breeders' Cup turf last year and winner of the Arc this fall. You know, she'll win this race. It doesn't matter what Lady Eli does, but you know, Seventh Heaven didn't run as well last time out. I do expect a rebound from Seventh Heaven. You know, why would they bring her here if they didn't think she could run better? But you know, these are the 2 chalks, and you know, I think there are more interesting races to discuss later on.
All right, let's keep it going then. The 6th race is, I think, one that's relatively wide open, or at least there's 4 on the morning line that are going to be fairly close, and it'll be interesting to me to see who ends up as the favorite. What's your take on the Breeders' Cup Sprint?
Yeah, this is not one of the races I was alluding to later on that could be much more interesting. You know, I chalked it out here. I picked Lord Nelson over Masochistic. I don't have any confidence that Lord Nelson is a better horse than Masochistic. I think Masochistic might easily, at this point in their careers, be the better horse, but I do think Lord Nelson is going to sit the better trip. You know, I think Masochistic's going to face some pace pressure in here from Delta Bluesman and Dre Fong, and I think Lord Nelson is going to, you know, employ his stalking style to great effect in this race.
All right, well, let's keep it going then. The 7th race on Saturday is another one on back to the turf. By my viewing, at least, and I'll be interested to see if you can convince me otherwise, this might be the most wide open of any of them. You could almost make a case for any of the runners in here, and we've got a couple on the also eligible list. What's your take on the down the hill turf sprint, race 7?
Well, you know, anyone who tells you that they love a horse in this race, you're going to have to look at them like they have 2 heads, because it you know, this is not the kind of race that you could love anyone. I mean, you could you know, take a philosophical stand in this race, and that's kind of what I did. You know, first, let me say that, you know, the turf sprints here at Santa Anita have been the horses who have prior downhill experience and success have had disproportionate success in this race at this racetrack. And the other thing about this race is that Europeans have had no success in it yet. And yet I picked European horses in here 1-2 because I do think, you know, Europeans or the Euros are finally going to find out what it takes to win this race. And I'm just intrigued with two of their horses in here in particular, and that's Washington, D.C. and Soudois. Washington, D.C. is a horse who finished close seconds in 3 of his last 4 starts, and what knocks me out about him is that in those second-place finishes, he beat a combined total of 41 horses in those races. I mean, that's astonishing. It's staggering, and you know, any horse who could do that is A-OK in my book. And as for Soudois, you know, he's a horse that was a very good second in the Darley July Cup in July to Lamato. And if he can run back to that race, I think he's a very dangerous horse in here. Of the Americans, I prefer a lot. He's definitely improved for Chad Brown since moving into Chad's barn. And his second to Tourist and the Bernard Baruch, the 4-star Dave, excuse me, in his last start, was by far the best race he ever ran. I mean, he had serious issues coming out of the gate, and ran a dynamite second. And Chad's got him fresh for this, and I like the cutback in distance for him. And I think the chances are that he just might be the best of the Americans.
Well, one thing's for sure, if you pick the winner in the turf sprint, you'll get rewarded because I don't think anyone's going to be a short price. Let's move on.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's funny you say that because one of the things that I've kind of like picked up on in here is I thought I was being kind of clever picking Washington, D.C., and apparently a lot of people are feeling the same way, and I got a sneaking suspicion he might be the steam horse in this race.
Yeah, it's possible. But even as the steam horse, I'm guessing he might be 5-6 to 1, and I can't see many even a favorite being lower than 4 to 1 or 7 to 2. So let's go on to the Juvenile. This is Randy Moss said this was one of the better runnings of the Juvenile he's seen in recent years, and even thought that there might be a Kentucky Derby contender or two in here. Do you agree with him?
Well, I'm impressed with the 2 Kentucky horses in here. I'm almost in love with Not This Time. It's very close, but I also like Classic Empire a lot too. You know, Not This Time. I liked him a lot when he won the Iroquois because his maiden win at Ellis was, although it looked good on paper, he won by 10. You know, if you broke the race down from a time standpoint, he showed a powerful finish in that race, and he duplicated that finish when he won the Iroquois. I mean, this horse has a crazy closing kick, and he's going to get the pace to rally into in this race, and I think he's very, very good. And Classic Empire impressed me last time, winning the Breeders' Futurity as decisively as he did in his first start with blinkers, because if you think about it, you know, you've got to throw his hopeful out because he wheeled leaving the gate, and so it wasn't even a start. It wasn't even a representative race. So the Breeders' Futurity was his first real representative race in 3 months. Mm-hmm. So he stretched out to a route in his first representative race in 3 months, and he crushed that field. And you know, I think he showed a lot doing that day, and I think he's very good too.
All right, let's keep it going. Race 9 on Saturday. I think we alternate back dirt to turf in every race, back to the turf for the Breeders' Cup turf. 3 very, very logical and likely relatively short-priced runners in here, 2 from Aidan O'Brien, and then, of course, Flincher for Chad Brown. How do you separate those 3, and do you see anybody potentially upsetting, at least in the exacta?
This is one of the races where I have a wild and potentially lucrative idea. I think Flintshire is the horse to beat in here, and I have immense respect for the Aidan O'Brien horses, but I'm a little bit concerned that this is Found's third major start in the last 5 weeks, and she is a year older now, and I think Highland Real is dangerous. He was second to Found in the Arc, and he has not raced since. So I think he's actually a little bit more dangerous because he's the fresher of the two. I think Flintshire getting back to his firm turf, though, is really the horse to beat. But my pick in here is Money Multiplier, who's 20 to 1 on the line, and I'm hoping he's every bit of that, if not more. If go back and watch the replay of the Sword Dancer 2 starts back when Money Multiplier finished second to Flintshire, you'll see that Money Multiplier ran a gigantic race that day. Everybody talked about how the rabbit in the race for Flintshire opened up the rail at the top of the stretch, and then Flintshire came pouring through. But Flintshire wouldn't have been able to come pouring through at that point in the race if Money Multiplier didn't vacate the rail on the far turn the final time, midway on the turn, which is what he did. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, by allowing Flintshire to come up on his inside, it put Money Multiplier in the jackpot, and he had to take up sharply, and then he had to angle 5 wide at the top of the stretch at a total loss of momentum. Meanwhile, Flintshire came pouring through on the rail. And Flintshire had about 3, maybe 4 lengths on him in upper stretch, and Money Multiplier came back on him and was beaten less than 2 lengths for it all. Now, people are writing off Flintshire's loss in the Joe Hurst last time because it was on deep turf. Well, I don't think Money Multiplier liked that turf course either. He's getting back to firm going. He's going to be a big price. He ran a giant race, the favorite in this race, 2 starts back. I'm going with Money Multiplier here.
All right, I like that. A little spicy long shot to add some value in the exactas and the tries. All right, let's move on to the filly and mare sprint. This is another one that I see as potentially very wide open. Your favorite is Have You Gone Away for Tom Morley, 3 to 1 on the morning line. Do you think she is the most likely winner, or are you going another way in here?
I don't have a real good handle on this race. I wound up picking Have You Gone Away on top only because, I thought that the ballerina that she won, albeit with a perfect trip, was the strongest prep for this race. She beat 5 others in this race that day. And she's definitely improved since moving into Morley's barn. And I think what's interesting about her is she's also shown improved early speed. She's much more in touch early. She showed that in the ballerina. She used to be a deep closer. I just think that's an indication of how improved she is. And she loves the distance. She's who I picked, and I picked Tara's Tango second because I think cutting back to a sprint is good for her. She had no chance against Stellar Win and Beholder in the Zenyatta. Last time out in 2 back, she won the Rancho Bernardo. So I think the cutback distance really, really helps her. But this is not a race that I had a real strong opinion in.
All right, well, let's go to the 11th race on the day. That's the mile. Tepin looking to repeat. Do you have a strong opinion in here, and how are you going to be playing it?
Well, I've got an upset opinion in here, but before I get to the horse I picked on top, I just want to say, Tepin is a tremendous mare, but I just wasn't in love with the way she ran in her 2 races since returning from her historically successful trip at England, and I just don't know if she's the same horse. And I think she's vulnerable in here. I think Ironic is extremely dangerous in this race, but he's a deep closer, and he's going to need some racing luck, and this is a big field, and if he gets a clean trip, he could absolutely win this race. And by the way, he won't be anywhere near the 8 to 1. I think he was 8 to 1 on the morning line. That was the third morning line on him. I mean, he's going to be very well bet in this race, and I think he's extremely dangerous. But I'm going with Spectre, who's also 20 to 1 on the morning line, like Money Multiplier 2 races before. I just think she's got an interesting profile. She's running Group 1 miles in her last 3 starts against, and the last 2 of them were against older males. She's nibbled on the edges. She's picked up minor awards, run fairly well. She's the most lightly raced horse in this race. She's got every right to improve. She's improving steadily, at least in terms of her time form ratings. I think she could take another step forward in here. And you know, I also like the fact that they reached out for a top American rider for her too, and Javier Castellano. And I just think that she's a horse that's going to fall way through the cracks. And I think she's got a chance to get a piece of this race, if maybe not, upset the entire apple cart. I just think she's interesting because I think her best races are still ahead of her.
All right. Well, let's keep it going, and we'll end with the big event on Saturday, the Breeders' Cup Classic, a historic race for California Chrome, and he'll be facing what looks to be a legitimate contender in Arrogate, if he can come close to replicating his race in the Travers last out. What's your take? Is it those two and just box them up, or do you think that there's somebody else that could come in and maybe spice things up at a price?
I don't. I think this race is pretty obvious, and there are occasions to take your shots, and I think there are other occasions where you really shouldn't look beyond the obvious, and I really do think this is pretty much a 2-horse race between California Chrome and Arrogate. Arrogate was tremendous winning the Travers last time, but I joined I heard Randy Moss's final comments when you were talking about this race, and he made a very interesting point in that Arrogate might not be all that fast early. He did inherit the lead on the first turn in the Travers because everybody seemed to go wide on the first turn.
Right.
And it's not like they were hell bent on getting the lead. And he's now got an outside stalking position in here from his outside break, and I don't think that's the kind of trip that you'd want to sacrifice. I think California Chrome's just going to go right to the front in this race, and if he makes the front in this race, then why should anybody in this field beat him? I mean, Arrogate, if he duplicates that otherworldly buyer that he got in the Travers, well, he could beat him, but I got to see that again. I mean, he's got to show that to me one more time. But I just think California Chrome's going to go to the lead on this field, and I think he's just going to lead him a merry chase.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. We only have a couple minutes left. Any other opinions you have on any of the undercard races for Friday or Saturday, or ways that you're going to use the opinions you've given out here to try and make some money?
Well, I'm very upset there isn't a late pick 5 on Saturday.
Right.
I wish there was. There should be an all Breeders' Cup event, late pick 5. I understand that pick 5 has a lower takeout, and maybe $1 bet in the pick 5 isn't worth as much as $1 bet in the pick 4 or the pick 6. But it's my opinion that that would have been found handle, and I don't think it would have cannibalized either bull if they went ahead and threw in a late pick 5. So, I've got enough, prices to mess around with horses and in other multi-race sequences, and if I could be right in 1 or 2 of those spots, then I'll be pleased.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Mike. I know you've got a very busy schedule out there at Santa Anita, and for everything that you're doing for us at the Daily Racing Forum. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for sharing your opinions. Best of luck to you on both the Breeders' Cup days. And thank you, everyone, attending the webinar. This was sponsored by Keeneland Select. If you missed any of it or want to watch a replay, it's available on drf.com/YouTube later in the day. Thank you all.